This week's iTunes review is brought to you by Jackie O. Jazz Hands. She writes a great, funny podcast about real topics we all struggle with. Kim gives great advice and support to people to live their best life. That just fills my heart. Thank you so much for taking the time to write me that 5-star review. And for those of you who have yet to leave that 5-star review, all you have to do is go on to iTunes or wherever you listen to this podcast and do the same thing, and I will read it on the air. So thank you so much, Jackie O. Jazz Hands. It fills me up when I read those reviews from the heart. Enjoy the podcast.
Welcome to the Fit Girl Magic podcast. If you are ready to find your inner magic, develop great habits, and a rock-steady mindset to feel confident, comfortable, and fit in your body, you are in the right place. I am Kim Barnes Jefferson, and I'll be giving you weekly doses of health, fitness, and life tips sprinkled with humor and real talk. If you're ready to be consistent without the stress of perfection, magic makers, it's time to slip into your favorite pair of PJs, grab some coffee, kick back, and listen to today's show.
Hey Magic Makers, I want to let you in on a little secret. I am regularly complimented on my skin, and that's because I take such great pride in the products that I use on my skin. A few years ago, when I was having hormonal issues, I had to completely upend my skincare because I was looking for products that didn't have any paraffins, sulfates, or any of the other yucky chemicals that could really disrupt my already effed up hormonal balance. And so I came across a product called Free. It's spelled F-R-E. And with Free skincare, I have been able to replace my skincare, and it has been an absolute positive game changer for me. And I want to share with you two of my all-time favorite products that they have. My favorite product is their sunscreen. Yeah, sunscreen. I am very sensitive to the way products feel on my skin, and their Protect Me sunscreen feels absolutely translucent. You put it on, and even though it has a thick feeling, it glides on so effortlessly onto your skin, and it stands up to the sweat. So if you are someone who is as active as myself, it is going to stand up to those hard workouts that you put it through, or laying lazily on the beach. It will stand up to your sweat. They also just came out with a product called Protect Body. And it's the same thing, but now I'm able to apply it to my entire body. It's ultra light. It smells great, but it also gives me a nice hydration to my skin in addition to protecting it from the sun. The second product that I absolutely, like I said, it would be the third product. The third product that I absolutely love is a product called Refresh Me. I like to keep it in the refrigerator in the summertime, and it's that product that I put on my face whenever I'm just feeling a little hot and sticky or just need a quick reboot throughout the day. I spray a couple spritz on, and it is just what I need to just get me through the rest of my day. And the beauty of it is when you use my special code, it's Kim Jefferson, you will get a 10% off your initial purchase. So do me a favor, if this is something that you're interested in, head over to that link. You will not be disappointed. If you are someone who likes great skincare, you've kissed too many frogs, this product will not disappoint you. So if you do give it a try, do me a favor, let me know which product you used and how you like it. Enjoy the show. Hey, Magic Makers, I had the awesome opportunity to speak with Miss Deanna Bryant, and we talked all about marriage. How do we keep a long-term marriage, relationship, partnership going, right? We all have those moments when, our spouse of years works our last nerve, or when you look at that person and be like, did I ever love you? How do we kind of find ourselves again? How do we find that relationship again? And how do you speak your truth if things aren't going well? Right? How do you find your How do you take control of the situation and decide whether you want this relationship to work again? And how do we start to, make this marriage grow again and get back on the right track? And I hope that you really enjoy this conversation, because I know that many of you have, we have these long-term relationships. Some of my listeners, friends, they've been with their spouses since college or high school. And, I'm like 2 snaps up and a tic tac for them. I'm hitting like the 27-year mark, and I'm like, how the heck did we get here? All right, ladies and gentlemen, have a listen, and please, please, please share with me what you think of this episode. All right. Today is a topic that I know many people, and Deanna and I just had a pre-talk before this. No one wants to talk about it, but so many of us have little marriage hiccups. Let's call it a marriage hiccup. Have marriage hiccups, or we find ourselves looking at the person who we've said we're going to be with for the rest of our lives and being like, who the hell are you? And what happened to the guy I married? Or maybe your husband or spouse or wife has said it to you. And so I really wanted to have this conversation. Deanna, I was reading through her stuff, and she wrote this one line that I was like, this girl has to be on the podcast. She wrote, all marriages struggle. And I think so many of us get caught up in the no one else has struggles but me. And I thought that was like the perfect opportunity to bring her on the show, especially, a lot of us had to survive Rona. And that might have been a good thing or a bad thing, depending on where you were in your struggle. So welcome to the show, Deanna.
Thank you so much. I love how you called that a marriage hiccup. And that's exactly what it is. And when we hit the hiccups, you know what we usually do with hiccups? We try to hold our breath until they quit, right?
Right. Or someone scares you.
Yeah. Eat a teaspoon of peanut butter and they'll go away, Just get rid of them. Let's just get rid of the hiccups and forget about them. And I do believe all marriages struggle. I've never known any good marriage, great marriages that have lasted centuries that'll say it was just all great.
Yeah, right.
But we buy into the movies where everything is perfect and great for the rest of their lives. I love the series Outlander, and Jamie and Claire. I mean, they're just been together forever and everything's just perfect and wonderful. And I'm like, let me see here. Right. You have not been living in the real world, but we do buy into it and expect our marriages to look like that.
Yeah, we buy it like hook, line, and sinker that, that we're always going to be the same person we were when we got married. And, my audience is 40-something women. So there are people who are listening to this. They're like coming up on 20, 25 years being married to the same person. And maybe they were in their 20s, been together, half their lives. And we all know we change.
Oh, do we ever? It is a constant series of changes because we're learning as we go. We are growing and becoming. We're learning from mistakes. We're trying new things. We're going through, I think we go through identity crises throughout our entire life.
Right.
We're always having to redefine ourselves. We do it in puberty. We do it again in high school. We do it again in college. We do it again when we get married, become parents. And it just keeps going on and on. And we change. Here's the disconnect. When one or both spouses are changing, but they're not talking about it.
Yes. I coach a lot of women and I see it regularly that maybe the wife starts to take more of an active interest in her health. And the husband's like, why can't we just sit on the couch and do what we've always done? Or vice versa. Someone picks up a hobby and the other one is like, well, why can't either we aren't doing it together or why are you doing that?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. It's like a wife that decides to cook healthier and her husband's eating cheeseburgers on the way home.
Right. I had a woman that she lost, like, good for her. She lost over 100 pounds and her husband would go call her on her way home from work and be like, do you think you can swing by, it was an ice cream place that I can't think of like a creamery and be like, can you swing by the creamery and pick me up a couple pints of ice cream? And she was like, okay, like, don't you understand what I'm trying to do? And you're just putting temptation into the car.
Exactly. And that's where it comes down to, okay, I'm choosing this. I'm going to do this. This is what I need to do for me. And not our expectations are what gets us into trouble.
Oh, say that again. Say that again.
Our expectations are what gets us in trouble.
And I think it's the unspoken expectations.
Absolutely. It's the unspoken ones. Because we have an idea that if I change, if I become this person, if I start doing things this way, then you should too.
Yeah.
Or we should be on the same page. And if we're not on the same page, well, you're just not supporting me, which that can be a problem. Sometimes that can be a problem when one or both, one partner changes and the other one feels threatened by the change. I'm threatened by who you're becoming. You're speaking your truth more, or you're not putting up with my stuff anymore.
Yes.
Or, the things that used to make you happy are not making you happy. So, when we expect someone else to follow the changes we're making, we get into that. I want to change you to be more like me.
Right.
And that's a dangerous place to be.
Right. Because if you're the person who is going through that change and your spouse, your partner is kind of like, what the hell is happening? You kind of feel that spouse feels threatened by the change.
Yes, absolutely. They feel threatened, and it can cause a little bit of a tension in the relationship. But that's also where you have to say, okay, if this isn't a priority to them, but it is a priority for me, I can shut them out, which will not be a good idea, or I will accept them as they are, where they are, and I'm not going to think that I'm better than,
right?
Because I've made these changes, because I want to do this, then I'm better than him, or I'm better than her because I'm doing these changes. We have to accept our spouses where they are at that time in their own personal growth.
So I love where this is going, because I know I've personally seen friends go through this where, one of the spouses always made all the decisions and the other spouse just went along for the ride. And now, something inside spouse one is like, you know what? I don't want you making all the decisions anymore. I'm done. I want to rise up and I want to start making some decisions about where we go on vacation or who we go to dinner with. And so how do we, as the person who's trying to rise up and as the person who's always been, the decision maker, how do we start to come to a détente?
Yes. And that's such a good question. That literally happened in my relationship, in my own marriage. And we've been married 25 years, together 27. And for years and years, he called the shots. And I let him. I kind of sucked it up, what I thought. And thought, well, because I had self-confidence issues, well, he probably knows better than I do. Well, he knows. But what happens is I suck up what I'm thinking and feeling and my input inside, my gut. And pretty soon I'm resenting them and I'm angry.
Right.
I'm angry because they're in control. They're telling us how it's going to be. But yet I have to own my part. I have allowed that.
Right.
I have not spoken my truth. So I've played into that whole allowing my spouse to control me. So, and when we get older, you will agree, I'm sure, we begin to find our voice.
Absolutely.
Stronger.
Absolutely.
We know what we believe. Women become more independent and stronger as they age. I really believe that. And what has to start happening is not to come back with that you're so controlling.
Yeah.
I can't do anything right.
Mm.
You have to come at it. It's not that your message is wrong. It's how you give the message,
Right.
I don't think any spouse should be telling the other spouse how it's going to be.
Right.
Because that's awful. That is being controlling. How they're going to behave, what they're going to do, how the decisions are going to be made. And yet a lot of people allow that to happen. It's just the path of least resistance. But you can't do that. You have to speak your truth. When a husband comes and says, this is how it's going to be, or a wife.
Right.
And in your gut, you're saying, well, I have a different idea. Then instead of attacking back is, can I give you my thoughts on this?
Right.
That's so much less likely to get a defensive position.
Right. Then you don't know what you're talking about. That
Right.
that automatically gets everyone's hankers up.
Exactly. You can't approach it with criticism or an attack or contempt. You have to go at it. Can I share my thoughts? Because if you start attacking, it's over. Conversation over.
Right. Because it's kind of like mutual destruction at that point.
Oh, yes. Yes. And usually ends up, if you've got a lot of anger and resentment, usually it's going to overflow in very ugly volcanic ways.
Yeah. It's like World War V.
Exactly. And it accomplishes nothing because really you've just unleashed your frustration instead of communicating how you feel. And I did go to my husband and I said, I really feel like you have taken control and made a lot of decisions. And I have allowed that. But I feel like I want to have more say in this relationship and our decisions. I want to be able to weigh in so that we can come to a middle ground in this.
All right, you said a bunch of stuff that I was feverishly writing down so I wouldn't miss miss a part. All right. So everything you said, I absolutely love. So the first piece is that I'm thinking of people who, they might not have the stones to go and say, "Hey, honey, it's time for us to make decisions together." Especially if that person has been driving the bus for 20 plus years. So it's if I just start to get frustrated, how do I open that conversation? How do I open that door? Because maybe they're nervous. Maybe they don't want the confrontation or afraid that it might be confrontational. Maybe, this husband or wife might be like, thank God I've been sick of making all these decisions. Or it could come back what you just said. It could be like, I make the decisions around here. So why are you rising up?
Exactly. I think it comes down to with letting go of the outcome.
Yeah.
You have to let go of the outcome because you're speaking your truth. That is the only thing you're responsible for. Whether it is understood, whether it is heard, which it'll be heard, but understood. We think that when we say something that somebody should automatically understand it. That's not why you do it. You speak your truth for you and let go of the outcome. If your husband becomes defensive, that's his problem. If he becomes angry, that's his deal. Not that you stop that conversation at that point.
Right.
But, for instance, if I were to say that and my husband were to become angry, my question would be a powerful question. What about my sharing that with you makes you angry? Because now I'm going to get to the root of it. Okay, so he's angry. So I can become defensive and get angry back, or I can say, what about that makes you angry? Then he's going to share his feelings. So you're able to get into a better dialogue with that.
Right.
But you always start with the I feel about this.
Because no one can take away how you feel. That's your own personal reflection of what's going on.
Mm-hmm. And you also have to look, for instance, again, in my own relationship, my husband grew up with a very controlling father. He called the shots. He controlled the money. He made all the decisions. And, you know, his mother went along with everything.
Right.
So what he's doing is he's bringing in his family of origin stuff.
Right. Yeah.
It's not that he's just trying to be a jerk.
That's what
he's mirroring. He's mirroring what he saw.
Right.
And so until he can become aware of that and see that, he's just acting like he naturally would.
Right. Yeah, you're right. Because if you think about, you know, even as much as we don't want to admit this, you know, we're attracted to, you know, some semblance of our family of origins, some semblance of how your father, mother, grandfather, grandmother, somebody in your kind of sphere of influence, if you will, how they were.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think everything that we become has been influenced by our childhood, who we were influenced by, what our parents did, our relationships with our siblings. And what I think is great about family of origins is not that, you know, you're just sitting there looking back and criticizing everything in your past, because every family has unhealthy elements.
Right.
There is not a perfect. I remember when dysfunctional family first came out, and it was like the definition was just a few kind of families.
Right.
Now it's like we're all dysfunctional.
Right. Everyone's got their stuff.
Right, because we're human beings and we're bringing in all of our stuff into a marriage, into parenting. And so our family of origin affects us. It will affect our children, how our kids grew up. My kids will have their family of origin stories, and there will be good, there will be bad. But I think when we can look at, why do I believe this way? Or why do I act this way? Why does my spouse do this? Can I see patterns here that helps me understand and have more empathy for where they are? Doesn't mean you excuse poor behavior or ignore it, but at least you can get to what's behind this, and it gives you more empathy.
Right. Exactly. I like that a lot, because you're right. I think if we look at, you know, for example, let's stick with your husband. Like, that's all he knew. Like the I'm gonna air quote, the man, you know, makes the decisions, right? And that's only thing he's known. So, and then you were like, all right, whatever. You know, it's probably something really small that you really could give a shit about. And then it took it as a check mark that, like, okay, she's good. She's cool with this. Mm-hmm. And then eventually, like, you know, then eventually you're like, you know what? I ain't cool with this.
It's so true. We suck things up. And I think we do it early in marriage more than we do in late marriage. That's why it gets difficult, because we want to keep the peace. We want everything to be beautiful. Right.
Because it's like, you know, we buy into the Hallmark hook, line, and sinker that, you know, we might have a little squabble, but at the end of the movie, we're going to walk up into the sunset.
Absolutely. And the thing about it is, people want to avoid conflict, and conflict is a wonderful way to understand your spouse better, to understand how they think, to understand how they feel, and also to help them understand what you feel and think. It can be if done well, if done well, can be a way to really understand your spouse better.
And it's so funny that what you just said, like, dovetails into the two things I wrote down earlier, was that, you know, you talked about, you know, well, I think a lot of people don't like conflict, but two, they're like, I want to make this person happy.
Absolutely. That and that's what, I mean, that's a great definition of codependency. I'm going to be a people pleaser, which is a hallmark sign of being codependent. I'm going to sacrifice my needs and wants because I just want you to be happy. That's my sole purpose. And think about back to dating. wasn't that exactly your sole purpose? I
Right.
just wanted him to think I was the best thing in the whole wide world. I just wanted him to be happy and just thrilled with me all the time. That
Right.
goes away.
Well, and I laugh because I have a couple of friends who are divorced, and the one thing that she when you get on the other side, the one thing she talks about, she's like, if I look back, we weren't meant for each other, but the fact that he chose me was what was like, oh my God, me? You picked me? Like, it's kind of like if marriage was like choosing sides for dodgeball. And you were like, oh my God, he picked me. And at some point, you have to just own your stuff, own your piece of what you bring to the marriage versus putting all the onus on your partner to bring all of the energy to the relationship.
Exactly. Because you can't expect one party to be the one leading and taking care and carrying all the energy to the relationship. But again, if your spouse is calling the shots, or if you find that you are grateful that your spouse chose you, maybe it's a self-esteem issue. Maybe you looked at this spouse or had this ideal that they're just perfect,
Right.
which will certainly wane, but they're better than me. And I've seen this happen in marriages where a wife or a husband felt like they were just lucky to have that spouse.
Right.
And so it gets into that, well, I'm so grateful, or I'm so excited, I'm so happy that I'm not going to rock this boat. I'm just lucky to have them.
Yeah.
That's not healthy either, because in a relationship, it can't be one up or one down.
Right. There can't be a scorecard.
Exactly. Absolutely. There cannot be a scorecard with you're better than me or you're less than me.
Yeah. And it's funny that you say that, because I have in the past, and I don't know if this generation falls victim to this as much as, our generation, that it was just like, that was the goal. Married, kids, you had you had your like blueprint, like married by this age, a certain aspiration in your career, 2.2 kids and 1.5 animals. And that's what you aspire to be. And I don't think it was as kind of hard coded as when our parents got married, but I think there was still some leftovers of that, blueprint family.
I do too, because I think in our age group, we were still raised in very traditional families.
Right.
They were still in that, I think my parents, I don't know about yours, we're talking, they're growing up in the 50s.
Right.
And so they're espousing all this ideal family situation. And then, we come along, we're still seeing our parents, we're still seeing our grandparents and how they related and how they worked. So even though we're different, a different generation, and maybe doing things differently, we're still carrying all that in.
Right.
But I do think, this is so funny. I did not get married until I was 27. And I live in the Southeast. I live in the Bible Belt. And
you're probably an old maid.
Everybody gets married down here pretty early. And I don't know why that is. I guess because, I don't know, probably the Bible Belt religious beliefs. You don't want to be too single too long, or you're living in sin.
Right.
So here I am, 27, and I used to have nightmares that I was like 35 and couldn't find a husband. That was the culture I was raised in. My mom married young, my grandmother married young, everybody married young. And here I am, 27. Will I ever find someone? And I look back now and think that's the greatest thing I ever did. And my kids today, none of them are in a hurry to get married. And when their friends that are close to their age wanting to get married, they're like, what, have they lost their minds?
Right. What's going on with you? Agreed. I think it's funny because what you just said is that I think we all had this like, oh, if you're not married by 25, like, you're doomed. And now I look back, and I didn't get married till I was 32. And I look back and I think to myself, I didn't know shit at 25.
Absolutely. I barely knew shit at 27.
And I'm like, I look back at like, you know how they always say like, oh, what are things you would say to your younger self? And I personally would say to my younger self, thank you, Jesus, I didn't get married at 25 because, like we talked about, you go through various evolutions. And I don't know if the person I was dating at 25 would have come along for the ride.
Right. Yeah, I look back to the men I was dating before my husband, and I almost laugh to think I thought that was a possibility, because I look back now and think, oh my gosh, I got so lucky that that didn't work out, or that wasn't the right person, because oh no, I would have outgrown them so quickly. That would have never worked for me.
Absolutely. And I, now when I have friends whose kids are, in that age group, I'm like, wait till 30. I'm like, because between 25 and 30, you will learn so much about yourself. Mm-hmm.
That's what I tell my kids too. And I look back now, knowing what I know now. If I could tell myself anything differently, it would be not to be seeking out that perfect person during those years, but to be growing, learning, developing, traveling, building a career, having fun. And if that person comes along your way, that's great, but don't search for that.
Yeah, right. And I think, it's kind of like I always say to people, when they're dating, it's like when you're dating and like you put out vibes, even if you don't think you're putting out vibes, you're putting out vibes. So if you're putting out the like, in 6 months, there better be a ring. And in 6 months from there, we better be walking down the aisle. And 6 months from there better be like, it just like, even if you don't say it verbally, like there's just cues that like are just coming off you.
Absolutely. It's what I call the vibes.
Yeah. The vibes are out there, and like people can just smell it, and they're just like, I'm out.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I'm absolutely out. So how does a marriage grow together?
A marriage grows together by continuing the dialogue. Sometimes you think you outgrow your spouse when what's really happened is you don't know how they've grown and they don't know how you've grown because you stopped talking about it.
Gotcha.
It's like you said, we change so much over the years. And what happens is we're doing all this change and life is happening to us, but we're still not going back to that drawing board, that relationship, and saying, this is what I've been feeling. I've been thinking I just feel lost, or, I'm feeling like I really messed up with the kids and it's really causing me a lot. We're not saying those things. We're stuffing them down. We're trying to deal with them on our own. A lot of times couples, what a couple used to fear back in the day, what they used to dream, what used to hurt them changes over the years. And unless we're talking about those things, keeping consistently connected through conversations, through asking questions as if you don't know your spouse that well, because assuming you know your spouse, well, I know what he's going to say.
Right.
I know what he's feeling. Do you really? Or are you making that up?
True.
So it's a constant dialogue, communicating hopes, fears, dreams. What are they struggling with? What do they feel about every area or everything that's going on with their lives? That grows the intimacy so that you're not growing apart, but you're understanding each other better. So you don't grow separately and go your separate ways.
Right. So it's, sometimes it might be actively sitting down and being like, what's going on?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's so important. But we think we know.
Right. So instead of, making assumptions about how someone has acted in the past, it's like, hey, it could be about the kids. It could be like something that you're thinking of, a hobby you're thinking of starting, or vacation you're thinking of planning. But it's like, hey, how would you feel about blah, blah, blah?
Yes, absolutely. How would you feel about, sometimes too, we see the emotions or the feelings our spouse has, and we take them on as there's something wrong with us. My husband comes home, he's angry. He doesn't really want to talk. He's kind of, gone inside himself. But I've not asked that question.
Right.
I'm just assuming there's something wrong with me.
Right. Versus he had a bad day at work.
Mm-hmm.
And
as opposed to just saying, hey, I notice you're angry and disturbed. Is everything okay? Is there anything I can do to help? He may say no.
Right.
But at least you've said, hey, I notice something's not right with you. I care about it. If you want to talk, great. If you don't, that's fine too. But I care.
Right.
Just by saying. And instead of just taking it all personally and staying out of their way, And
I like exactly what you just said, because I also feel that I know sometimes I really notice this in my marriage. Rona forced us to be together all the time. And I realized that before Rona, he's off, coming and going to work. I'm off coming and going, doing my thing. And the times of just having a conversation about just nothing, or just having a conversation about, something substantial has increased dramatically, because we were forced to talk to each other.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that it has made a difference in many, many families, that they've spent more time together. They've talked more. They've engaged more. And I think even though this has been a horrible thing, it has been a blessing too. However, the other side of that, with couples that were already in a big fat mess, the divorce rate has gone up during coronavirus too, because they've been forced to face the fact that we don't have any intimacy. We don't have anything to talk about. Where, the gap is so wide that now it's, glaring, which even coronavirus, I realize that sometimes my husband's idiosyncrasies have been more glaring than when we were not stuck at home all together.
Right.
But I'm sure he says the same of me.
Right. And so I totally agree. And I believe you're right, that if we were on the verge before, we were forced to be home for what was like 2 weeks, then turned into 2 months, and turned into 3 months, and here we are a year and a half later. I think if you already had plenty of cracks, there was no amount of Gorilla Glue that was going to save that relationship. But I'm hopeful that it was a lesson that you learned about what it was about your spouse partner that just didn't light you up anymore.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's okay to find that out.
Yeah.
We think, well, they just don't do it for me anymore. Well, why?
Or I also find people aren't, I'm like, do you need to define it? So like, what does do it for me anymore? Like, what is it about it that, is it a physical thing? Is it a mental thing? Is it slurping coffee? Like what?
Or my pet peeve, crunching chips. I just want to kill myself.
Oh my God. There's a commercial on, I think it's for pretzels, and they're all on like a conference call, and the guy is just like chomping away, and he's the only one that's not in the room, and the whole room is just looking around like, what is happening? Like, what? And someone just speaks up, and he's like, Charlie, can you mute yourself?
Exactly. Exactly. And I hope that the coronavirus has also helped people to say, look at their relationship and having to be with each other all the time and say, I noticed some things we need to work on. I notice that we're not connecting and this has made us uncomfortable. And we need to go to the drawing board and see what can be done.
Yeah, 100%. I wanted to have you on because I think, we also now is that most places are opening up. Do we lose that closeness that we had? Like, how do we keep that closeness when you're literally not forced to be with each other 24/7? Is it having, people talk about having, date nights, but could it just be like sitting down on Wednesday and just doing a thermometer test on, what's going on with you?
And that's what I do recommend for couples. I think a lot of times couples can get into going out with friends, going to concerts, going dancing, but it's busyness.
Right. They're kicking the rock down the road.
Yeah. They're having fun.
Right.
They're enjoying themselves, but they're really not connecting on that deeper level. So I do think intentional time together is super important. Now, I mean that you have to schedule 15 minutes every night to sit down on the couch and connect? Not necessarily, but you need to talk about the relationship and what the issues are all the time. All the time you need to be talking about what's coming up and not putting it on the back burner till later, or just being what I call the captivity of activity. We're just too busy to connect. And we're just going to go and do, and we're really not going to connect and where we are,
100%. I feel like I'm 100% with you. I feel that we as Americans, we get caught up in our busy. And, if you ask anybody before Rona hit, you would be like, hey, Deanna, how you doing? Busy.
Yeah.
Right. And you're just like,
exactly.
Too busy to even know my name. And that's just that's just like what was always kind of the immediate bounce back of like, not like fine, it was just like busy. And so I'm hoping that we don't slowly crawl our way back to that busy place so that we don't have, I was guilty of it. Don't have those, like my husband and I call them condo meetings. Like we're just like, it's like literally like a 15-minute thing. And he's like, hey, I need a condo meeting. And it's like a 15-minute thing. And it could be something really small or it could be something really big.
And I think that's great because you're saying, and I think that's great that he just says it. I think that would be great for couples to whoever feels like they need to have that, to be able to say, name it whatever you want. Hey, I need to have this meeting. And that way you're intentionally coming to it. If you wait for the perfect moment to have these conversations, you probably won't. Something always is going to come up. And you have to be intentional with taking these moments. I have, she's in her 40s and her husband are in their 40s, and they have checkups. Like sometimes they'll go to dinner and she'll say, tell me 5 things you love about me. And then she'll turn around and do that for him, because we don't always say those things when we've been married a long time. We don't just say, let me tell you some things I love about you. Or some questions to ask too is, what can I do to make you feel even more loved? Questions like that to get things started. Or I've just been feeling this way. Or, hey, I've noticed you've been feeling this way. Is there anything you need? Just little conversations like that. Or, when you notice somebody is having a hard time, stopping what you're doing and sitting down, instead of, and I'm bad to do this, get in the kitchen and I notice something's going on and I'll just start asking about it while I continue to do my stuff.
Right. Exactly. You're like over here.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not really, here's my eye contact. Let me stop what I'm doing. Let me sit down and sit with you in this for a minute.
Right. No, and you're right. Because it's like, sometimes those conversations, you're cooking dinner or, getting the kids ready for whatever you're getting the kids ready for. And so you got like one ear over here and one ear over there that you might miss kind of the tone or a couple sentences because
because you're not totally focused and engaged. And to have a real conversation, you need to see facial expressions. You need to see body language because they tell a whole lot about what somebody's feeling. If you're taking in the words, the facial expressions, the body language, you're getting the full picture when you're paying attention to like that. My husband and I sit down and have coffee on Saturday mornings. Just sit there and drink our coffee and that's kind of our check-in time. And we talk about whatever's up, I'm not saying we have to bring up issues of problems in our relationship.
We're just
connecting.
It's just your like scheduled time of.
Exactly.
And yeah, I agree. Like, my husband and I have lunch every day and it just was literally born out of Rona. And it's just one of those things. And one day I didn't think it was something he liked. And then one day I just happened to have lunch without him. He's like, why don't we have lunch together? Like it's like, he's like, he like tells people regularly. He goes, it's the best part of my day.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And I'm just thinking like, I was making lunch.
But I bet that's the last time you did that.
Right. But it was like, for me, it was like, well, why wouldn't I ask if you wanted to have lunch? Because it's like, you're now trapped at home now. So like, why would I have you? Why when I would make lunch for myself and not invite you to like participate?
Right. Absolutely. I think that's beautiful though. Really is. My husband and I used to not sit down and watch TV together. And because of this virus, I could only read so many books before I needed a break. And so we started watching shows together. We used to never do that.
Yeah. My husband picked, there's usually probably one or two shows that we're both like, we can say we like it, that we can binge and watch together. And, back in the day when there wasn't binging and, I can think of, there was like 3 shows that like, Tuesday night at 9, we would be like, all right, we're going to watch this show. And then now that like, you can watch TV whenever the hell you want. We don't do that. We agree. We don't do it anymore. It's more of it's more of a scheduled thing now versus Tuesday at 9. We know we're going to be sitting on the couch.
Right. So do you guys schedule time together?
We do. It usually, sometime during the week, I'm like, hey, what are you doing on Saturday? So sometimes it's very regimented and sometimes it's more off the cuff.
Yeah. And it's great to have both.
Yeah.
It really is. But to both be willing to engage in that and bring it up.
Yeah. So
not expect the other one to always do it.
Yeah. And not to be, if for some reason he's like, yeah, no, I just kind of just want to do whatever the heck I want to do. Great. All right. I asked.
Yeah. Don't take it personally. Yeah.
But 9 times out of 10, he's like, yeah, what time?
Mm-hmm. When you can tell your truth, say no, or that doesn't work for me, and somebody doesn't react defensively or hurt, you know what? It becomes a safe place that I know, what? That person, my spouse, makes it safe for me to speak my truth and accepts that. And I think that's a gift we can give to our spouses when they say no, is to accept that and to honor that. Okay, that's fine. Maybe another time, instead of being frustrated or angry because they don't want to do what you want to do.
Right. And I think, we hit on so many great topics here, and more of it is really, you talked about, it's just being able to speak your truth, how to approach the situation, because not every day it's going to be glitter and unicorns.
Lord, no. Lord, no.
It's not going to be, and just being able to just let go of the outcome. As soon as you said that, it made me think of when I first started my business. I was like, I have to let go of the outcome. I can't have thousands of people knocking on my door. I just have to just start with one person. Let go.
Right. Exactly. And it's the same. I have that same principle in my coaching business of I've got to let go of the outcome. And it's great when you're raising children.
Mm.
You're doing the best you can, and I've got to let go of the outcome because they are little people or they're grown people or as
Right. And they're
mine
going to
are
make their own
older.
decisions, even if it makes you
Yeah.
drink.
Right. But I've got to let go of the outcome. And we have to do that in our marriages too. Because if we're always expecting some certain outcome, then we set ourselves up for it. And we
Right.
might be surprised.
Yeah, completely surprised. But I love, everything you said is really focused on communication. And even if you've had crappy communication for the first 20 years of your marriage, there's no reason why you can't turn the corner after listening to this podcast.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There are more resources out there than ever before. I mean, you have relationship coaches. You have incredible books out there that can teach you how to communicate effectively. John Gottman's work is just key for relationships. I would recommend anything he has written.
Oh, yeah.
That your
He's so
marriage
good.
needs. Yeah, he's just fantastic. But there's no reason I'm not saying you can save every marriage. I absolutely am not saying that. But I think a lot of marriages end before they get a chance to learn the skills to fix it.
Agreed.
Because we're not taught that.
No.
We're not taught how to have a marriage. It's just trial and error. And usually we're thinking, well, either I'll do it like my parents did it, or I'll absolutely go to the opposite extreme. And neither one of those are good. You have to come to a middle ground of a middle way of being, not on either extreme.
Yeah, I like the middle because, we're attracted to extremes, right? It's all or nothing. It's like,
yes,
I get the fairy tale and the castle and the glass slipper, or I get nothing. And sometimes you're like, well, we're in a cardboard box, but I'm happy,
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy because number one, I choose to be, and I choose to work on my marriage and not expect it to be a fairy tale. There are no real fairy tales.
No. And, one last thing I'd love to bring up with you is, do you know who Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell are?
I do.
Yeah. So this was probably about a year ago. They were being interviewed. They were doing some movie together and they're being interviewed. And they're like, I think they've been together almost 30 years. And they're like, and they're not married. They have no desire to be married. And they're like, well, how do how everyone says, how do you make it work? And
of course.
Yeah. And so they're just like, they looked at each other like, I choose to be here every day. And I was
that's true.
And as soon as they said that, I was like, because you probably get the same thing. Like, how have you lasted all these years? And you're just like, I got nothing here. Like, I'd love to tell you that, like, I sprinkle some magic stuff in his coffee in the morning, but I got nothing. But when they said that, I was like, that is true. You have to choose to be here.
Every single day. Choose to love. Choose to be here. Choose acceptance. We've got, I'm not saying we ignore problems. I don't think you accept everything, but you accept the things you cannot change about your spouse. Because you have to think about it. They're having to accept some things about you that are just you. And, I think on my days where I'm frustrated or my husband's on my nerves, I think, well, my gosh, I know he gets frustrated with me and I get on his nerves.
Yeah. You're like, I don't know what it is, but I'm sure there's something that I do that works his last nerve. And he just like grins and bears it.
Absolutely. But it makes me more compassionate,
Right.
It makes me more compassionate.
So what I always ask all of my guests, what makes you feel magical?
When I am in that place of peace that is not dependent on what's going on around me. That's my magical place.
Ooh.
Because I can't control what's happening around me. But when I can get into that place of peace, that is my greatest desire, is to be in a peaceful state. And if I can find that peace in the midst of whatever's going on, that's my magical place.
That's good. That is really, really, really good.
It takes work to get there. Don't get me wrong.
Oh, yeah. For sure. It takes place to get there. I absolutely love that. So for everyone who's listening to us, Deanna, where can they find you on the socials?
On social media, you can find me on Instagram under Revive Your Midlife Marriage. Well, it's not .com. I guess it's Instagram.com,
right.
But Revive Your Midlife Marriage. And then I also have a private face group for women called Midlife Marriage Mastery Group. You can go to Facebook and find that under groups. And then you can go to my website, reviveyourmidlifemarriage.com. I do offer a free resource there, 3 steps to increase your intimacy with your husband, and also my podcast, Revive Your Midlife Marriage Podcast.
Awesome. And her podcast is awesome. That's how I found her. I was trying to find someone on this topic, and, I went down the Google rabbit hole and I found her. And then when I found her, I went down the Deanna rabbit hole and said I needed to have her on the show.
Well, I have just been delighted to be here. Once you asked me, I started listening to your podcast, and I was like, well, that's another one I want to listen to. So it works well.
I could spend a good 20 hours a day listening to podcasts.
Oh, I could too, girl. It's ridiculous. I mean, I could podcast binge.
Oh my God. I live in the Northeast. And so now that it's summertime out, I'm like, I have more walks. I'm like, oh my God, I could go on so many benders of podcasts.
Your husband, you come home after 3 hours. Where have you been? Oh, walking.
Right. Well, sometimes he wants to come for a walk with me and he's like, so did you have plans for a podcast or can I come along? And I was like, I did have plans for a podcast, but I'm going to say yes.
Because I want to be a good spouse.
Right. I want to be a good spouse. And I've had a couple walks by myself this week, but come along.
That's where the compromise is, huh?
It's the compromise. So thank you so much. And I can't wait for everyone to, if you took anything away from this, or if you are having one of those kind of marriage hiccups, feel free, reach out to Deanna. She knows her stuff. And, we don't want you to be that statistic. Or maybe if you are going to be the statistic, how do you go about making sure you can say, you know what, I did everything I could before you check the box and you're like, I'm out.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I like that. It was a pleasure being here. Thank you.
You are quite welcome.
Thank you for listening to the Fit Girl Magic podcast. If you've made it this far, yay. I'm thinking you enjoyed the show. Let's continue the conversation on Instagram. You can find me at Kim Jefferson Coach. In order for me to keep sharing this message, do me a favor and leave me a 5-star review on iTunes. While you're there, don't forget to subscribe so that you won't miss an episode. New episodes are available every Wednesday. The Fit Girl Magic podcast is intended to provide you with tips, tools, and strategies that will help you make better decisions about your health. I really appreciate your feedback and your support. Thank you so much.